All right, team one, you're up.
All right, folks, good morning. We are Team One, and this is our presentation for the Cloud Tech Excellence Program. The team consists of Angelique, myself, Harwinder, Kate, and Sarah. We'll do some introductions here in just a moment. But today we're going to be talking to you about our International Pet Players web application. It's a wonderful little site that we'll show you in just a moment. But before then, we'll go ahead and do some introductions. Like I said, my name is Chris Mickey. I'm our primary speaker. Angelique Butler was unfortunately unable to be with us today. She had some prior commitments that she had to deal with. She was going to be presenting the architecture and design. I'll be doing that for her today. We'll go ahead and pass it on to Sarah, though.
So I am Sarah Graham, and I had the role of scribe for our team project, and I will be presenting technologies and environment used. Harry?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Harwinder Singh, and I was backup. I'm a backup, actually. I will be talking about issues and challenges. Kate?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I will be presenting the future state of international pets and how we can incorporate more options for automating our app development and monitoring our on-demand infrastructure.
All right, so just a quick overview of what we're going to do today. We already did some introductions. Next, we're going to move into the architecture and design, followed by the different tools and environments that we used within our process. Then we'll get into some challenges, issues, and the lessons that we learned from those things. And then we'll finish up with a demo and then talking about the future state of our project. So this is the page that Angelique would have been presenting had she been able to be with us today. I'm going to do that in place of her. So first we start with local files on our Git repo that get pushed up to GitHub. And then we use the AWS plugin for GitHub to connect us to CodePipeline. And what that allows is when we make changes, it lets CodePipeline know to go grab the repo, and then it pushes things through as a zip file up to an Amazon S3 bucket. Along the way, that event triggers an SNS notification that emails us to let us know that an update was made. And then once those files hit the bucket, they get extracted and our website moves out to the public internet that's accessible via URL or IP address. And then it also triggers some logs in CloudWatch, which we have a very basic Lambda function set up that later on would allow us to enable some more advanced monitoring and automation via that Lambda function. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Sarah and let her talk a little bit more about some of those technologies and the environment.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So I will follow on with Chris was talking about the process, and so I will go over each individual feature or service. So starting at the top of the chart, we have IAM, or Identity Access Management, and we use this to add our personal user accounts, security groups, roles, and policies. S3, or the Serverless Storage Service, we use this to host our static web page based on reasons Angelique, or in this case, Chris just mentioned. CodePipeline, we use this to automate our code deployments, and we chose to use this opposed to Jenkins to simplify our process as it's already within AWS and we did not have a complicated build sequence. For SNS, or the Simple Notification Service, we had our notification based on an S3 event, and it, again, as Chris mentioned, sends an email to those subscribed, and that informs us anytime there's an update to the bucket. Lambda, we included this feature for future state so that automated management of infrastructure resources can be added when ready. CloudWatch, we are using to view log files and any account activity. And of course, GitHub is our repository or version control tool of choice where we stored our project artifacts. And I will turn it over to Harry.
Good morning again. I would like to share issue and challenges we faced during our project. The very first issue is related to security. For this project, we were all given admin rights, but in production environment, it can be a security risk. There are many ways to secure infrastructure. First and very best practice would be creating a rule of least rights to make sure that identities, groups are only authorized to carry out the most minimal set of functions required to fulfill a certain task. So second issue overwhelming services. As we know, AWS offers 200 services, more than 200 services. As a new user, it is easy to feel overwhelmed. There are a lot of related services sound same. For example, code pipeline, code build, code deploy. It gets confusing which one to use. Some of the services are a duplicate of each other, meaning that they do the same thing. For example, for this project, for SNS notification, we set up event on Bucket, but in class lab, we pushed events to CloudWatch, and from CloudWatch notification was sent out. There are multiple ways to solve the problem, but the question is, which one is best to use? The very first challenge we had with GitHub, because of graphical versus command line interface, this issue became hectic when we were helping each other or troubleshooting Git push or pull problems. The second challenge we had with SNS notification. To troubleshoot this challenge, we tried different techniques and online sources, for example, Google, AWS, and documents. To eliminate the risk of losing our awesome running project, we created another S3 bucket and tested SNS notification topics. After multiple access policy modifications, we were able to pinpoint the issue and fix it. The third challenge we had, again, with the SNS notification. Before, it wasn't working, but now it was overworking, meaning that every time pipeline was updated, we would receive too many notification emails. Again, we searched online solutions and solved it by tweaking configuration and filter settings. The last challenge we had with timeouts. On a very first day of this project, we learned AWS session times out are frustrating. For example, if you are configuring AWS service like a pipeline configuration page, if you are inactive for more than 20 minutes, you will lose your work. But we learned session timeouts can be modified by using a session manager in the AWS service page. Thank you, and back to Chris.
All right, we're going to talk about some of the lessons that we learned through this process. Honestly, a lot of these seem like they're common sense, but a lot of times those are the hardest ones to learn and the most annoying to try to troubleshoot because it's not obvious. It's not something that you really feel like you should be Googling. First and foremost, as Kate, who is our admin, she created all of our user accounts. We got all the emails sent out saying, hey, you've got this account, and then we moved on. And then all of a sudden, none of us could access our accounts because we realized we didn't have our public-private key pairs. Just like Michael told us, if you don't grab them right at the beginning, they're gone forever. And so it wasn't a huge inconvenience, but we did have to go back and regenerate those. And in a larger group, a larger infrastructure there, that could be a very daunting task. The next two are somewhat related and can pretty easily be summed up as make sure you're in the right region. When our accounts were created, some of them ended up in different regions. We didn't even think to check it. So when one person created an S3 bucket and one person created the code pipeline, we were all happy until we realized that they couldn't talk to each other. And after a lot of time spent trying to troubleshoot, somebody just happened to look up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen and notice that what region they were in, and then that started the conversation, and 2 minutes later we had the problem solved. So again, make sure you're in the right region to keep from setting up unnecessary services and potentially spending unnecessary money. And then finally, the last two, again, somewhat related. Harry mentioned that we had our SNS notifications. If you create that notification topic before you create the bucket, it drastically simplifies the process of getting those set up. It's still possible to do if you do it the other way around, but it does require some extra work. Honestly, it requires extra work that we couldn't exactly pinpoint a solution for, and then we found an article telling us to do it the other way around, and that it's set up in 30 seconds. As soon as we hit go, it was ready. And then finally, those SNS notifications that Harry mentioned that were overworking. When you push through code pipeline, every single file in the repo gets uploaded to the S3 bucket in our situation. And with those SNS notifications, every single file triggered a notification. So if you've got 20, 30, 40 files in there, it's very easy to make a couple changes and all of a sudden your inbox is at capacity and legitimate emails not getting in because you've got so many notifications. So filter your notifications. I'll show you how to do that here in just a moment as we jump over to our demo. So here we have it, folks, the International Pet Players web application. I'm actually going to, if it's all right with our instructors here, I'm going to post that link there, A, so that you can look at our animals on your own time, because, I mean, why would you not? But B, so that you can kind of follow along with us if you want, as we make some of these changes, and you can see them as they're made in real time. In all honesty, this is just a quick little website that we whipped up that has some basic information about us, basic information about the pets and animals that are important in our lives. And of course, Kate's beautiful dancing dog gif that just adds that touch of style, really puts it over the top there. So on top of the website, we've got our code pipeline. We can see we've got 2 stages here, a source stage and a deploy stage. We've got our S3 bucket. All the files here, we've got some images, obviously in the images directory. And then I do want to point out that the timestamps here from a test run before we got started, they're all pretty much the same. That's something to keep an eye out on. Just a reminder that everything does get updated all at the same time. And then we've got our SNS topic that's going to talk to us here in just a moment. So in order to facilitate this demo, we're going to hop in here to our repo. We've got all of our files there. I'm going to go ahead and open up our index.html file. Maybe not the best idea to have all your style information here, but it works for us. So right now we've got background image 1. I'm just going to make a quick change and turn that into background 2. We'll save and quit out of Vim. Before I do push to the repo, I'm going to do a pull to make sure I'm up to date, try to avoid any conflicts there. I am. So then I'm going to add the index file. I'm going to commit the index file, updating the background, and then I'm going to push my change to the repo. So that finished up. If we flip over to the code pipeline, just like that, it's in progress. Here in just a moment, if it doesn't update itself, we can manually reload like we've seen in some of the labs, but it's been cooperating the last couple days. Maybe. There we go. So it succeeded. And immediately the deploy stage changed to succeeded. Our timestamps are just now, so we're good to go there. If we take a look at our S3 bucket, I am going to manually reload this. All of our timestamps should match again. Yep, August 12th, that's today at 10:15. A few seconds different, but that's just time as everything propagates through the pipeline. And if we jump back here, a reload should show a different background. And there you have it. So a small change to the code, updated the repo, which triggered the AWS code pipeline, which updated everything in the bucket and gave us a new background. The last piece I do want to go ahead and show working are those SNS notifications. And we can see some there. So there are 4 HTML files: hello team 1, index delete, index, and lambda test for various reasons. I'm going to jump down here to our notification topic and show you guys. This is how you would filter, either based on a prefix, a suffix, a file suffix there, or a prefix, something in the name, to help minimize the number of notifications you are getting. We're just looking at HTML files. There's 4 of them, and there are 4 notifications. In each one, it tells you that it was an object put, and it'll give you the file that triggered each notification. All right, that's great. We're happy there, almost done. Oh, not the pipeline, S3 bucket, that's what I want. So we're going to come back in here, and then I'm going to delete this one that's already flagged for deletion. Make sure that we get our notification there. And it does require you to spell properly, so good luck with that. In the bucket itself, that file is no longer there. And if we jump back over here, boom, there we go. We've got our object delete, index delete. So I'm going to call that a successful demonstration, and I'm going to jump back over to Kate and let her talk about the future state of the project.
Thanks so much, Chris and Sarah and Harry. Good morning, this is Kate. For this part of the presentation, I will describe the future state of international pets and how we plan to incorporate more options for automating our app development and monitoring the serverless infrastructure. First up, building out DevOps. For international pets to meet the project requirements, Team 1 created a pipeline to automatically connect a remote Git repository into AWS, which extracts and deploys a package into the S3 bucket. In the course of creating the automated web app pipeline, our team decided to kind of iterate rapidly and then fine tune the process. As a result, we initially used a single main branch in Git for our code repository. A useful next step would be to incorporate more Git flow practices into our repository for version control and release management. For example, we could create a dev branch for continuously integrating changes to the website. A test branch in Git could make use of a CloudFormation YAML template for on-demand provisioning of infrastructure. In the case of international pets, a feature branch could spin up a test bucket on the fly into which code could be deployed. An automated test could be run every time a developer pushes a commit into the feature branch. Second, although International Pets is already a grade A looking website, we might want to add some user-driven features. Visitors to our website will probably want to see information that's relevant to them. For public websites, visitors may be coming from international locations and want to see a page that uses localized content in their language. Other user-driven features could include automated application security. If users want to submit their own pet content, a web application firewall could block them from submitting to the site based on their rogue IP address and avoid security risks like SQL injections. This would also deny threat actors any information about our critical pet assets. Lastly, and as my colleagues mentioned, incorporating some of the lessons learned from SNS, we want to continue to fine tune and expand our use of automated event notifications, particularly for infrastructure monitoring. Our prototype uses an S3 bucket, and SNS notifies the team by email when there's a change to that. In a future release, we would like to expand the use of automated event monitoring via CloudWatch and CloudTrail events. In the case of international pets, our site is on the public internet, and it's possible that we would see an enormous spike in traffic due to the overwhelming force of pet cuteness. This traffic could impact data transfer charges and bandwidth. In layman's terms, acute overload, which would also impact site loading speed, et cetera. Thus, it would be beneficial to have CloudWatch alerts that monitor for certain events, such as spikes in traffic, and then trigger automated notifications to systems administrators. And that is all. Thank you.
All right, and at this point, we'll go ahead and open things up to questions. If anybody's got anything to ask, we'd be more than happy to answer it.
Question for you. How did you create this infrastructure and pipeline? What was your process for that?
So initially, we were going to try and incorporate Jenkins, but as we were looking around at some of the things that AWS offered, we noticed that Pipeline had essentially the same types of features that Jenkins was going to offer us, at least for what we were going to use it for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me interrupt you.
Okay,
because
sorry.
I think you explained that clearly earlier, that you had a simpler path, and so that's why you chose Code Pipeline. That wasn't
sure.
my question. I apologize.
Misunderstood you then.
Yeah, sorry. How did you build like the infrastructure pieces, not the Code Pipeline pieces? Like, how did all this get built? What process?
That a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
We initially wanted to manually set up an S3 bucket so we could right away get experience with using some of the DevOps tools. We considered, a full-on web server, a hosted web server, and EC2 instance. But one feature that we were really excited about is that S3 has a lot of services potentially built into it, like CloudWatch. So it's easier to enable and use some of this stuff right out of the gate. And of course, it's less expensive. So for our initial iteration, we did a manual provisioning.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
All right. Cool. Other questions? Okay. You guys are right at time.
Wonderful.
So
And nice
Perfect.
job. Nice job.
Thank you.
very nicely
Thank
done.
you. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.